And we're live. It's Rod with Pow Group, everybody. Welcome back on the Pursuit of Wealth. Today is Thursday. It's April 17th. I hope you're doing well. And with me today is Irwin Simon, CEO of Tilray Brands. Irwin, thank you very much for taking the time today. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm excited about the discussion too, and look forward to being able to talk about Tilray Brands with you.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming, highly requested by the community. So I think I speak for everybody when I say, again, thank you very much for your time. And had a lot of questions reached out to the community. I also have an investment group as well. And we spent a lot of time on it, myself included. We had close to 150 questions. Obviously, we won't get through all of those questions today. I got it down to about 30. So we'll see how much we have time for today. We'll start, I won't sugarcoat it. Obviously, the most recent quarter, Q3 2025, your earnings, they missed estimates. It was a challenging quarter for the company. How do you plan to address investor concerns, especially, that's been frequently missing estimates? Why not lower guidance in anticipation of this, like kind of under promise and over deliver? Can you touch on that?
So let me be very clear. We don't give guidance on revenue. We give guidance on EBITDA. And, from a standpoint there, our analysts, which are 14, we talk to them on a regular basis, but they come out with their own guidance. So when you say we missed guidance, it's guidance that was put out there by the analysts. So that's number one. Number two is from an EBITDA standpoint, we put out an annual guidance, not a quarterly guidance. So we did miss, analysts' expectations. But what's important to come back and say we missed, in regards to our revenue, our revenue was basically, if you look at it, the $183 million, and basically if you look at, what was for currency, and we did a SKU rationalization, and if you add all that up together, we basically were ahead of what the analysts had out there. So I think that's number one. Number two is you got to come back and look at, in the quarter from our free cash flow, our businesses are making money. Our business, our beverage business, we're investing in that business, so it's not making, what we would like to make. But you look at the acquisitions, and the other part is the corporate overhead in Tilray today. We also in the quarter settled, lawsuits that were, previous lawsuits. So I come back and I say here, number one, our margins grew dramatically. We could go out there and just get sales for the sake of getting sales, but our margins were up dramatically. We took out, $20+ million of costs. And, we're focused on building something here. At the end of the quarter, we were sitting with about $247 million of cash. We paid down, close to $76 million in debt. And the third quarter is one of our weakest quarters in regards to seasonality. So I come back and I say this here, we missed guidance by analysts, not our own guidance out there, number one. Number two, if you come back and add, in constant currency, and you add back for the SKU rationalization, we would have been ahead of what our, the analyst guidance were. And, the balance sheet is strong. The margins are up. We grew dramatically in Germany. In Canada, we decided to ship product to the US, to Europe, which ultimately much higher margin product. And we decided not to sell vapes and, infused pre-rolls where we lost multiple dollars. So, you don't run a business quarter to quarter, you run it for the whole year. And that is something I come back and sort of say, you got to look at the total picture, not just what analyst guidance were.
Exactly. That's a good point. And, it's not just Tilray either. It's the entire industry. It's been a 4-year brutal bear market. But more specifically to Tilray, though, what else can you do as a CEO of Tilray and as a company? What can you do in your eyes to kind of tame some of those investor concerns, especially with ongoing dilution. There was the news today. Thank you for releasing that as well ahead of the interview. It knocked off one of my questions, the reverse split. I was going to ask you about that. We can touch on it a little bit, but obviously that, and now there's concern of even more dilution after the fact. Executive compensation has come up a lot. What's Tilray's strategy to restore that investor confidence?
So I come back and look at where Tilray is today, and you look at, investor confidence out there. What I've tried to do since taking this company over, in 2019, is build a diversified company, a company that's made up of good people, good brands, with a real strategy out there. And ultimately to be able to service consumers and to reward our shareholders. And that's very much what I've tried to do. And if you step back today, listen, we're close to $1 billion of sales. We're diversified in our cannabis business, our beverage business, our wellness business, and then our distribution business. If you come back and look at our balance sheet, it's something that's very, very healthy out there. So, businesses take time to grow. Businesses don't just overnight become big business. You go back and look at Tesla, Microsoft, Costco, Starbucks. It took multiple years for these companies to become profitable and to grow into something. We're a 5-year-old company, which we had something COVID in between for a couple of years. And unfortunately, a lot of what's happening within Tilray today depends upon, regulatory. In Canada, we pay over $155 million Canadian, in regards to excise tax, which is probably one of the highest excise tax of anything in the world. In Canada, we're limited to where we can sell our beverages. In Canada, there's still, an illicit market out there. I thought somewhat of US would have legalization out there in regards to whether it's medical cannabis or doing something with drinks. It's not. Europe has been something that's, if you come back and look at recreational cannabis legalizing, it's not happened, but there's only certain countries that medical cannabis is legalized. So I've had constraints because of legalization. Yeah. I've had constraints because of regulatory. And you know what? There's been a lot of cannabis companies that got into the cannabis business that just were not good companies. And there's a lot of investor dollars that have been lost, okay? And I understand there's, the appetite for investors out there when you lose a lot of money in the cannabis industry, that there's not the appetite out there. And with that, every stock basically within the cannabis industry today has fallen below that $1 level. In regards to dilution, in regards to my ATM or issuing shares, that has been something we've continuously done in regards to whether it's paying down debt or doing acquisitions that I think are accretive to, Tilray and Tilray shareholders.
Right. And I know share buybacks, that's a question that came up a lot. I think, I can probably answer it. Is it because you're just waiting for the company to become profitable? I mean, there's some companies that have done buybacks that necessarily haven't achieved profitability, but a lot of them don't have any debt. So is that the focus, kind of paying down the debt, getting rid of the debt and the interest, and then would you consider a share buyback?
Absolutely. And I think, some of the best acquisitions are buying your own stock back because you know how to integrate it. And I think that's what's important. And I've seen companies that buy back stock and just ultimately they borrow money to buy back stock, and the stock has dropped dramatically and they're still sitting with that debt. They bought back the stock at $36, $37. Their stock today is trading at $2 or $3. Okay. I'm big on debt from a personal standpoint and having that balance sheet right. And, there's a lot of cannabis companies in trouble today that got high levels of debt and paying debt levels at 14, 15%. And we're going to see a lot of cannabis companies go away because they can't borrow money today. There's no really borrowing money in this industry today. And, you don't want to have a lot of debt in your balance sheet. And I think that's the first and foremost to me, is making sure that we have free cash flow and our debt levels are very manageable, to run our operations.
Right. And I think, a lot of investors are saying, now would be a good time to kind of put your money where your mouth is. And if you did a buyback, it's such a low price. Obviously you get a lot more bang for your buck. And there was some recent insider purchases, institutional purchases as well. So I think, that's kind of a vote of confidence for investors. And who knows, we might even see that trend continue. There's been, like I said, a few different insiders within the company that I think the last time it was around $1.89 that it was added. So like I said, definitely an opportunity for the company to kind of regain some of the investor confidence.
And you brought up compensation. Listen, it's the elephant in the room. The majority of my compensation is stock incentive. I'm the largest individual shareholder that I know of out there. And with that, I've never sold a share, don't intend to sell a share. And I know shareholders that lose money. I mean, it's been a big hit to me, personally, with Tilray stock declining. And, from a standpoint there, I think that's what's important. There is, from a salary standpoint, it's important to get a salary, but my net worth and my income all comes from my Tilray shares. And like I said, you can see how much stock I personally own, and that to me is worth a lot of money. And that's, that's been a major loss to me. And it's something I work hard at every day, is to increase our share price for all the shareholders out there, which I'm a large percentage. Within Tilray today, our employees own like little over 1% or about 1%, over close to $1 billion shares. So it's a lot of shares we own from employee standpoint.
Right. Yeah, and some of that stock compensation had to do with the loss and the recent earnings, and the news today with regards to the reverse split. We we were discussing this in the Powder private community, and a lot of people were kind of confused as to why the company wouldn't try to regain compliance organically. Like, obviously it'd have the 180 days, the 6 months, more than likely could have got an extension. Was there a reason for doing it early? Like that was my question actually, was that, have you thought about even delisting? Is that a focus for you? Do it quickly and get the dark cloud. Was that kind of the goal, to get that dark cloud out of the way?
Listen, I think when you see companies, with their stocks trading 45, 50 cents, most people's perception is the company's going out of business. Financially, they're in trouble. So that's number one. That's not the case here. Number two is coming back with a much higher stock price. And I think, like I said before, almost every company in the cannabis industry and a lot of other industries have done that. Okay. It allows us, if we're going to do acquisitions, to have a higher stock price. There's a lot of investors and institutions that can't own stock if they're below $3 or below $5. So it helps us bring in a lot of, potentially institutional shareholders. The other thing is, with that many shares outstanding, it probably costs us at least another $1 million a year, in Nasdaq fees, etc. So there's a lot of reasons, to get this behind us. And you're right. Listen, we could have went for, another, it's 180 days and you can get extension. But I think what's important is if we can jumpstart it, get the stock back up there, get the confidence, from shareholders back into our numbers, and hopefully, bringing in a lot of new shareholders into this here helps the stock tremendously.
Definitely. And full disclosure, I am a very large shareholder in Tilray, so I'm with you. We feel the peaks and the valleys just like everybody else, right? And you mentioned profitability and debt being a focus for the company. In terms of profitability, and specifically in Canada, obviously excise tax, that's a big question mark. We don't know. I have a question a little bit later on that with regards to the elections here. But in terms of profitability, what are we looking at in terms of timeline for reaching profitability, in your opinion?
So, as you heard me say before, our cannabis business in Canada is profitable from a free cash flow standpoint. Our European business is profitable, from a free cash flow. Until we get all the savings out of our beverage business, which we expect to get in the first quarter, from a free cash flow, we expect to be profitable there. And you got to remember, when we acquired the ABI businesses, it was losing, approximately $8 million. When we acquired the Molson's, it was losing. And we've so far have taken out about $22 million of costs, and we're looking to take out over $30 million of costs and get these businesses back on track. And there'll be some good, good business there. We're looking to do some other consolidation. We closed 2 breweries. So there's a lot more we can do there. One of the big things that you got to realize here, from a company standpoint, to ensure that we are first in class, our insurance for all our brew houses out there, all our grow houses out there, as a cannabis company, as a public company, it costs us close to $10 million a year in insurance, IT costs from software, public company costs. So before day one, I turn the lights on in this company every day. I have a $25 million overhead just to cover from being a public company, being in the cannabis business, from my IT costs to protect us from cyber security and stuff like that, and being a public company. And then as you put other things on top of that, from employees, from a corporate standpoint, from SOX work, my finance group, the rest of our group. So we have a corporate overhead that we have to cover every day. And then as you continuously, as I said before, clean up a lot of this legacy stuff, legacy lawsuits, legacy shutdowns of stuff that I've had to use our cash to do that. So as we go into 2026, which our fiscal year ends the end of May, my big thing is we got to be cash flow positive. And you got to remember what's in Tilray today. So let's step back for a second. Yes, our market cap is, $500 million or so, but we have close to 5 million square feet of grow facilities. We have in Leamington, Ontario. We have in Leamington, Ontario, 2 major facilities, actually 3, because one other one came from, Tilray. So from a standpoint there, we have about 3.5 million square feet of buildings and greenhouses in space there, and from a standpoint, they're worth a lot of money. We have in Mason, we have a facility that's worth a lot of money. We have just outside the Buffalo region, the Redecan facility. We have in Vancouver. So as we look at what levers, we have a tremendous amount of real estate just in the cannabis industry. We have our breweries out there. We have 10 breweries out there, 8 operating. We have our spirits facility. We have in Europe a major facility in Portugal and one in Germany. So there's a lot of assets and good assets that are worth a lot of money within Tilray. And as I look, listen, one day, are these assets, storage facilities for AI? Are these assets, what else do we do? I'm always looking at what can I do within Tilray to enhance the value for shareholders. So we have big infrastructure in place today. We got a lot of assets within Tilray today. We got some good businesses within Tilray today, which does not represent what, the enterprise or the equity value is within Tilray today. So there's a lot. Listen, I thank all our retail shareholders. A credible asset is we got retail shareholders. We trade, over 30 billion shares a day, which is a great asset base. So, and if you come back and look at our businesses, cannabis is not going away. I'd like to see more clarity on regulation. Beer business has been around for 5,000 years. Beer is not going away. Beverages is not going away. So we're in businesses. We're not in businesses like Xerox or the Polaroid camera or, Corning glassware or these old businesses that were making, Xerox machines or something. We're in businesses that got some good future. As I look at Tilray today, what else do I do to diversify the portfolio if I can't get legalization? And that's why having a strong balance sheet, and that's why looking at my other assets, if I'm not going to, don't need all this growth for cannabis, am I going to use them as data centers, or am I going to use them for other things? So there's a lot of other levers to pull within
Yeah,
Tilray today that I'm always studying.
that's exciting. Yeah, and I've been to the Masson facility. I've seen it. It's huge. And to your point, like Tilray isn't a small company, right? In 20 plus countries, this is a behemoth. When a lot of other companies, they're just getting Canada under wraps, or they're in a select few states. Like this is a massive, massive company, and I'm very bullish on the craft beer segment as well. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, and we call it Alberta. It's really on the up and up, and yeah, I think it's exciting. You mentioned crypto and AI as well, which we'll get into in just a bit. In terms of retail, though, I've heard different MJ cannabis CEOs say, being in the retail segment and a producer at the same time is the total wrong way to go about it. Do you agree with that, or have you considered looking into retail in cannabis and alcohol?
So I've been very clear. I do not want to be in the retail business in the cannabis industry. There's great retailers out there, and they're great partners, and I don't want to be in competition with my partners. I want to make good products for them, and I want to sell them products and let them focus. It's hard to be both a retailer and a manufacturer and a marketer. And, I don't mind in my, brewing side to open up brew pubs that are connected to my facilities, that I can bring consumers and families in to taste my beer, eat my food, and enjoy an experience. But that's kind of the only retail, side of the business that I want to be in from a hospitality. But it's important for us to be selling beer and enjoy the experience and doing events. Like this weekend is 420. We're doing a big event in Atlanta for 3 days, 420 Fest. We'll bring in over 12,000 people. But what are they going to be doing? They're going to be drinking all our SweetWater beers, all our Terrapin beers, our Montauk beers, enjoying our spirits, and maybe some of them are enjoying cannabis. It's not coming from us because we can't sell cannabis there, but it's the experience of the music, the bands, and the fun around it. So that's what I want to do. But retail is just, not our business.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I love that answer. And we've seen where other LPs were into retail and they got out of it, and there was some retailers boycotting their products. I actually had that happen when I went in to buy something. I went to buy, like, oh no, we don't sell them anymore. They opened a store next to us down the road, and we're peed off, right? But yeah, you touched on brew pubs. What about bringing brew pubs to Canada? Have you looked at that?
So I think there's a big opportunity for us in Canada in craft beer business, and I came close a couple times in buying something there. And I'd love to come to Canada, in the brew business. On the other hand, listen, I'm all over, right now, the Ontario Liquor Board, the LCBO. You've pulled off a lot of the American brands there. Why aren't we selling cannabis drinks, in the LCBO, or why aren't we selling them in the beer stores? And I will tell you this here, like I said, we have a 45% market share, and I think there's some excellent products that we sell in Canada today in regards to drinks. If I could sell, our cannabis drinks in Canada today, additionally in the cannabis, retailers, if I could sell them, it would help sell more in the cannabis retailers because consumers would be educated about them, number one. And number two, it would be a big, big, big boost to our business because you know what? Consumers like to drink. The beverage business is like a $7 trillion industry, and you walk around. That is, from a delivery standpoint, the younger generation do not smoke as much. They do vape, but they're always drinking something. And just think, if we could sell in the LCBO or beer stores, or we could sell on tap cannabis drinks, how big that could be. And I think that's a big, big opportunity. And that's something we got to continuously lobby, the Canadian government for that, and, a reduce on excise tax, because there'd be more money coming in from excise tax on that. So you wouldn't have to charge as much. And if you come back and look at it, Canada is the only country in the world where they have, has approval for recreational cannabis. How do we sell more in different methods and bring the high excise tax down? What you don't want, Canada created this industry, started this industry, and you've seen a lot of cannabis companies, of the 1800 get into financial trouble or in financial trouble because of the high excise tax. Let's protect this industry. Let's regulate it like we have. Let's get rid of the illicit market like, it should be. And let's figure out how to market, educate consumers on the right quality and the right benefits from cannabis. And that's what I think is important to do.
100%. Yeah, there was a lot to unpack there. I have some questions that will tie into those later. But yeah, with regards to beverages, I've tried the beverages in the US. Like I went on a trip to Colorado and I bought like 4 of them and I had a couple sips and they were actually really, really bad. I won't name any names, but I've said for a while now, if people from the US even taste one of the Tilray drinks that you took that portion from Molson Coors from the Trust partnership. Yep. And these drinks like the XMGs, the Molos, they're absolutely fantastic. And I can't wait for our neighbors to the south to really try them and experience them. And to your point, you're not going to be able to go to a game, an NHL game or an NBA game, and you're not going to be able to buy, I don't even think you'll be able to buy edibles. I think it's always going to be beverages, right?
Well, I would love to start with beverages, but I got to tell you, you come back and think about it, edibles, the same thing. If we could sell them in drugstores or we could sell them additionally, what kind of opportunity that would be for us. Because, you look today in a lot of handbags or you look today in people's pockets, they're carrying edibles with them for sleep, for anxiety, for relaxation, etc. And, we're seeing tremendous growth within our edibles business and tremendous growth within our drinks business.
Absolutely. Well, this wasn't one of the questions that I had, but you made me think of it on the fly. What about Chamath Palihapitiya? Did you see his recent comments saying, it's insidious and follow the science. The science is looking ugly, turning our kids into zombies. What went through your mind when you saw that, if you saw that?
Listen, I think of anything, when the former Surgeon General came out about alcohol and all the, all the things that alcohol do to you, I guess if you're home drinking and, ultimately and doing the same thing, it's going to turn you into a zombie. Not having moderation of anything is going to do that. So I agree. If you're going to just sit home in your room and play, games and smoke cannabis, it could turn you into a zombie. But if you take the wrong medications, it's turning you into a zombie. And I think with the science behind it is this here, there's a lot of good science and research we're doing with the benefits from it. And I think that's the thing is this here, there's those that drink every day, those that smoke every day, but those that just sit there and smoke. If you sat there and drank 10 beers, you're turning into a zombie too.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's a good point. And, I've been consuming for multiple decades now. And, I've seen some people, you look at them and it's like, okay, you shouldn't consume cannabis, right? It's no secret. Some people are affected differently. But to put it all, under one blanket statement, I don't think that's reasonable. And, we have to remember here, this is medicine, and this is helping a lot of people. Anybody can abuse anything, right? We can abuse cheeseburgers at McDonald's, but you don't see us closing down every McDonald's. We have to be realistic, right?
Well, you got to be realistic. Let's come back and look at cigarette companies. We heard for all these years, and they do cause cancer, and ultimately people still smoke. And you come back and look at cigarette companies today, whether it's Philip Morris and Altria, what are some of the best performing stocks out there with some of the highest dividends is the cigarette companies, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And people still smoke. Philip Morris still makes a lot of money. Altria still makes a lot of money. We know the causes of cancer. It says right on it, this will kill you. But people still pay $20 a pack for smoke. So I understand, from the science and the research, but leave it up to the consumer, and
Agreed.
anything's got to be done in moderation. And I'd love to have the multiple evaluation that Philip Morris and Altria have in selling cigarettes, where there is known that it causes cancer. Okay,
Mm,
so I'll take that any day.
totally. And that's one of the other questions segueing into that. There's been a lot of peers. You mentioned Altria. There's been a lot of big alcohol, big tobacco companies, giants getting into the space. Has Tilray's phone been ringing? Like, have you been talking to any of those players? Is that something that you would even consider, or would you rather remain independent?
Listen, I think right now my phone is ringing. I think there's still, and I think if legalization did happen in the U.S. or some form of legalization, my phone would definitely ring, either from a medical, from a beverage company. I think there's a lot of them, a lot of the beverage companies out there watching what's going to happen with Delta 9 in the
Yep.
U.S. and from a standpoint there. I think that opportunity at the right time will come to Tilray. And, listen, there was a time, and this was before me, I think, that there was an opportunity for Altria with, one of the cigarette companies, with Afria. It didn't happen. So that's why, we need to go at it alone. We're going to go at it alone. If we find a great strategic partner that can help us with R&D, that can help us with distribution, that can help us, very much so. So far, BAT and Altria, have invested in this industry. Yes, they can write checks in deep pockets, but the stocks of some of those have not knocked the ball out of the park either. So there's got to be a reason to do a strategic alliance with somebody or a company that's going to provide something other than just a check.
That's a fair point. Well, that's a good way of thinking about it. And pivoting over to the United States, there's been a lot of confusion. Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball either, but let's say hypothetically, if the US were to reschedule and it lands up on Schedule 3, what would be the impact? Like, what would we as consumers see, on the front lines? Like, what would be the impact on Tilray's operations? Would it effectively give you the green light to sell medical? So if doctors prescribe it, what about like an insurance adjudication for your products as well under a Schedule 3 outcome?
So I think number one, it clears up a lot of confusion on legalization of cannabis in the US. Okay. Like I have a lot of my investors. I want to be very clear. We cannot sell cannabis in the US. I get asked all the time, why don't I find your products in the US? Why aren't you selling in the US? I cannot sell cannabis, cannot touch cannabis in the US. From my beer businesses, I'm ring fenced that I can't even take money out of my Canadian operations and bring it to the US. And if I ship money to the Canadian operation from the US, I can't take it back. So there's strict banking laws, there's strict laws in regards to cannabis, of what I can do in the US.
Right.
I think in regards to rescheduling cannabis, I think, ultimately what we should do is leave it up to each of the states from a recreational standpoint. Cannabis today is Schedule 1. It's the same as cocaine and heroin. We should have a rescheduling where it's scheduled as 3, and medical cannabis should be legalized from a federal standpoint. That way, there's safe banking.
Mm-hmm.
There's no worrying about money laundering. It's safe banking. It can go into real banks. And with that, I think there is, President Trump, which I agree with, is looking to bring down, pharmaceutical costs. I think there's a lot of reasons medical cannabis, which would be prescribed by doctors, which would be sold, whether it's in drugstores or sold in commissaries or where it has to be prescribed by a doctor, like it's Europe. And that way it is regulated. And, Tilray could be in that business tomorrow by taking its business model today from Europe or its business model from Canada. And I think if it's a $10 billion industry and we get a 3% of it, it's a $300 million business for us with, great margins. It would be very instrumental. So, but I think the other thing is you come back and look at the numbers. there's about $1.1 billion, $1.2 billion of excise tax taken in Canada today.
Mhm.
If you take that and take a $10 billion industry out there just in medical cannabis is probably larger. Look at the tax dollars or the excise taxes that the Canadian or the US government could bring in. And I think if you look at this tariff war going on, I think there's a big opportunity to make up some of those shortfalls out there, just getting the excise tax, from a medical cannabis business that's legalized in the US. And it also takes out a lot of this money laundering. I think it helps
Mm.
reducing the whole fentanyl issue out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's something important that one day the Trump organization would look at.
100%. And we're seeing, the fentanyl crisis everywhere, right? It's running rampant, even in Canada, pretty much every
And
major city. So,
and I agree 100% what the Trump organization is trying to do to get fentanyl. I forget what the number was, how many kids that were killed and died last year.
terrible.
And that's when they talked about, zombies. How many children die of overdoses on fentanyl or fentanyl infused in, whether it's in anything,
Cannabis. Yeah.
cannabis, etc. We got to get fentanyl out of here.
Yeah, all the more reason to legalize it, right? And regulate it, test it, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you mentioned not being able to sell in the US. Actually, before I jump into that, the tariff bit. So like, what would it look like under a rescheduling outcome to Schedule 3 in medical? Would you spin up operations in the US, or would you just absorb the tariff costs from Canada and ship product from Canada to the US?
Right now, under the USMC, I don't know if it would have tariffs, charged against it. So,
To medical, you
you
mean?
know, yeah, from a medical
Okay.
cannabis, I don't know. Because right now our hemp products that are coming in from Canada do not have tariffs against them. Okay.
Okay.
But the cost to build these facilities and the size, and I do have plenty of capacity. I'd rather grow it in Canada with the Canadian dollar and ship it to the US and pay the tariff gladly if I could do that.
Yeah. Okay, that helps. And you mentioned not being able to sell into the US, obviously for obvious reasons. With the Nasdaq listing, you can't get in trouble with that. But there's been other companies that are starting, novel structures, starting to venture into this market. Have you been looking at that, kind of looking at that blueprint that other peers in the space have laid out? And like obviously MedMen comes to mind. Like, was that the goal for MedMen, or is that more of a post-legalization thing? Maybe if you could just touch on those two real quick.
So, that was originally the objective, a goal of MedMen was to have a vehicle upon legalization with a brand that could be a national brand. And that didn't happen, and not everything had worked out with MedMen. But the reason I don't want to do it is this here. I don't know what ultimately it's going to look like on legalization. And I think, the companies that have gone out there and put these structures together, I'm not sure they have worked. Okay. And it's kind of, they're out there. They can't be on their balance sheet. I don't like if you can't control the operations, you pay for something, you can't consolidate it, you can't put it part of your businesses, you can't have board members on it. So with that, I'm not in favor of having all these, funky structures out there and waiting for legalization. I'd rather invest my money back in the beverage business. I'd rather invest in businesses where I can get revenue, I can get EBITDA, and I know what I'm investing into instead of having a waiting game out there.
Right. Yeah, and you're laying the groundwork now as well. So once legalization inevitably does happen, you can easily pivot and integrate that into your existing operations, right?
If legalization happened in medical cannabis, I could be in the medical cannabis business within 60 to 90 days. If I could sell cannabis infused drinks in
Mhm.
the US, I could be in that business with 60, 90 days. I have manufacturing facilities, I have infrastructure, salespeople, I have distributors out there. I'm in on almost every supermarket, every convenience store.
Mhm.
Ultimately, if I had to sell it into drugstores, I would work out with one of the big major drug distributors, medicine distributors, We do that in Germany today. We own a distribution business that sells cannabis into 13,000 drugstores. So we
Mhm.
could take that model and work with it here. So we very quickly could pivot into that business if that happens from a legalization here.
That's excellent. And real quickly, I know we're running short on time. Like MedMen, if you could just kind of paint us a picture. You own, I think, 3 MedMen stores and the IP. Could you explain what it would look like in a post-legalization era? Like, what would your vision be for MedMen and that IP in those stores?
And you heard me say before, what I would want to do, and I don't want to be in the retail business, I would want to use the MedMen brand to sell to other retail stores in the US. I would do a license deal where they license the IP and let, like McDonald's or Burger King, open up MedMen stores, in the US. That's what I would like to do with MedMen, and that was my, original intention. Not to be a retailer, you heard me say that before, but
Yeah.
have the IP, take the MedMen brand that's well known, the red bag or the red box, and be able to sell that, in the US. But on the
Sure.
other hand, there's no reason now with SweetWater 420. If I could sell, SweetWater beer in the US and I could carry it over to cannabis, that I would sell SweetWater 420, or I would sell, Shock Top pre-rolls or Shock Top flower. It's a
Mhm.
brand already known. So I can pivot some of my beer brands over to cannabis if I could ever do that.
So is there a constraint with that right now? Is the reason for you not doing that it's not legal?
Well, number one is because I trade on Nasdaq, I can't do that. And number
Right.
two, um, I can't do that. You can't have an alcohol brand and a cannabis brand with the
Okay.
same brand.
Okay, you answered that question then. So, but like
Yeah.
hemp drinks, would that fly since it's legal under the Farm Bill?
So I am hemp drinks today. We sell hemp, our THC, 5
Right.
milligram hemp. We have Happy Flower. We have Fizzy Jane. We have 2 other brands. And right now we're selling it in 10 different, states.
Right. But is there anything preventing you from a legality standpoint? Can you put this Sweetwater brand under a hemp drink? Like, could you make a can with like the Sweetwater 420 and make it hemp infused?
So I do have a 420 hemp infused drink today. I'm not using the Sweetwater or the
Sweetwater.
Montauk or any of those brands yet today.
Okay.
Because I want to, make sure clarity where it is. I don't want to ultimately go in and do something that I can't do. And so I absolutely not doing that today.
Okay. Gotcha.
But
And
but
then
we're going out and selling. We're look to build a good size, THC Delta 9 hemp drink business. And with Happy Flower, we're doing a direct to consumer.
mhm,
With all our other businesses, we're selling it, into our beer distributors. We're legal in each of the states, and we're seeing some really good results from it.
absolutely. Yeah, I've seen tons of reviews. People love it. So I can't wait to try it actually. And then in terms of that, like what about bringing some of those formulations to Canada and vice versa? Like, have you thought about taking some of the formulations from Canada and putting them into the hemp drinks? And then, like I said, the Happy Flower formulations, what about bringing those to Canada, vice versa?
So our people work together on our drink business.
Hmm.
And, right now, it doesn't make sense selling hemp drinks in Canada because you can get cannabis drinks. Okay. That does
Right.
not make sense.
Hmm.
And like I said, I would love to be able to sell some of our cannabis drinks in Canada because, as you said, we have some great tasting cannabis drinks in Canada. If I could sell it in the U.S., it's $1 billion business for me, but I can't sell it in the U.S. today, so I got limitations. So as back to your comment before, I have all these things. I could move quickly if certain legalization, and I say this here. Look at we Tilray today. If 3 things happen in Canada, if they cut my excise tax in half,
Excellent.
there's $75 million. If I could sell more drinks in Canada, how big that would be, and ultimately the illicit market in the U.S. If I could sell cannabis drinks in every state today, how big that would be. If I could sell medical cannabis, and in Europe today, if I could sell pre rolls, the only thing I could sell in Europe is flour. So
Right.
if any of those things change, there's a tremendous amount of opportunities for Tilray. But you got to be thankful for what you have and thankful for what you own. And I got to build upon those businesses today. And that's what Tilray is trying to do.
That's fair. And you were on a Fox Business interview, and maybe if you could just touch on this real quickly. Have your views changed? Like you said that you expect some form of legalization, medical. Do you still think that has your views changed in that on that
No,
topic in the U.S.?
not at all. I think, the president is looking at, reducing our deficit. I think the president is looking at, from a tariff standpoint, how to bring more dollars in here. And, I think there's a lot of other areas that he has to deal with right now. But I think something will happen with cannabis
I
in the
agree.
U.S. from a rescheduling, from a medical standpoint, something will happen within it. And as one of the largest, or not the biggest grower of cannabis in the world today, Tilray will be there for it. Is not, the fourth largest craft brewer with brewing will be there for it. With a good sized wellness business today from our hemp and selling into 17,000 supermarkets, we'll be there for it, and a business in Europe. It's just, I wish I could control, legalization, and I wish I could control the regulatory part of the business.
Right. Yeah, and there was new legislation introduced in the House today, bipartisan, to potentially legalize it federally for individual states that have legalized it. So we'll see. That's sort of in line with the president's kind of views on everything, right? Too, right? Leaving it up to state law and leaving it up to the individual states. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, we all want it done yesterday, and we don't have a crystal ball. But moving over to the Canadian side, we have elections in under a couple of weeks. Have you had any conversations with some of the new potential leadership? Are you hopeful that they could potentially bring some reform to Canada, like you say, whether it be excise tax or expanding into different channels like convenience stores, or bring it into restaurants, or are they more hostile in your opinion?
No, I don't think they're hostile. I think, again, fortunately, everybody's focused on tariffs right now. And I think that's the big thing, is dealing with ultimate tariffs. But, I have been out there and I've been very vocal about an industry that the Canadian Liberals, ultimately brought in as legal or recreational. We got to do something about it. And what I'd hate to see happen, US legalizes and Canada becomes a forgotten child out there with all these greenhouses and everything that Canadians did in regards to creating the recreational cannabis world. And you think about it. I talked about, the taxes that we pay today, and we're the largest employer in Leamington today. And what we've done in the community in regards to, jobs, what we've done in regards to money being spent in the community, what we've done in construction and building greenhouses, etc. So the cannabis industry is something, that should have a lot of longevity. And I come back and I say this here: just don't cut taxes. Let's figure out how to grow the industry. Let's figure out how to make sure we educate consumers. Let's make sure that we come out with additional products that are safe. And I'm big on safety, 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 safety. I'm big on the quality that we put out is tested, the potency, the genetics, and everything here, no different than beer, bourbon, vodka, everything, that a consumer knows what they're getting. And, that's big on me. And, no different. Don't drive if you're going to smoke, and go out and educate all the things. If you're going to smoke 5 a day, you could be a zombie. But that is important, is make sure that we put out the right education there with this. And, you can't be half pregnant. So if we're legalized today in Canada, let's sell it right. And let's make sure we're educating everybody about the benefits of it and the harms from it too.
Absolutely. And that's something the illicit market doesn't have to worry about, right? That costs a lot of money to do all those testing. So if they can start to support the industry, and, I have a daughter, and you have kids, right? So, I know tons of people who have sons and daughters, and they're not turning into zombies. And Canada is doing it the right way. There's tons of start low, go slow, and there's tons of safety out there. Like in my elevator in my condo, it's always don't consume it if you're under the age of 21, right? So knowing the risks and leaving it up to adults to make the decision, right?
Exactly. And again, if we can put on cigarettes what we put on, what it could do for you. We can put on a can of beer or consuming it if you're pregnant or don't drive, etc. We should make sure we're doing all those things with cannabis, but coming out publicly. Right now on packaging, if you look at our packaging, there's more claims on it, more information on it than any packaging I know of. You can't advertise, you can't talk about the brand. I don't mean going putting big billboards and TV ads, but let's come out and educate the consumer the benefits of it, the brands, what potency, what genetics mean, how it's grown today, what it's grown without pesticides. If you eat 3 pieces of chocolate, you could get very high from it. Don't do that. And that's what we need to do, is be able to do that. And we can't do those things today.
Yeah, well, stepping stones, we'll get there. In terms of international, you can just answer this one real quick. Like, what would be, you had the news today, the new pastels in Australia, obviously Germany, but, to increase those margins and pay less excise taxes, you mentioned that international medical is going to be a very big focus. What would be, say, your top 3 international markets? I know France making some moves lately, and Switzerland, but could you give me like a top 3 international markets that you're focused on at the moment?
Germany, the UK is a big focus. We just opened an office over there, and that is to grow in both cannabis and alcohol. Germany is probably the biggest. Poland is a big market for us. The Czech Republic, Spain. Listen, I'm looking at things in Japan. So there's lots of markets we're looking at. I think there's some stuff in India that can happen. And in essence, to some degree, medical cannabis is legal, but not illegal. I mean, so I think the important thing is, how do we grow it? And I'm big into medical and doing the research and have science behind it, and not just coming out and suggesting it's turning you into a zombie. But if it is turning you into a zombie, let's do the research and saying, if you consume, how many ounces of cannabis a day, what could happen to you? And I think that's what's important that we should be doing.
Interesting. Yeah, very good point. And in terms of the German market, what sort of sales numbers could we expect over the next few quarters out of Germany, in your opinion?
Listen, Germany will be our biggest market, and again, the demand for Germany, the demand for cannabis in Germany is tremendous. I think we have tremendous benefits. We have a grow facility in Germany. We have a grow facility in Portugal. The important thing is, excuse me, the Europeans want Canadian cannabis. Even though we got grow facilities over there and can supply them, they want Canadian cannabis because they know Canadians, we're the first to market and know how to grow cannabis. So with that, we're GNP certified in Canada. We can ship to Germany. And, in my last quarter, as part of my sales number that people, suggest I missed, I mean, the difference between selling 2 or 3 grams, or metric tons in Canada versus selling 2 or 3 metric tons in Europe is hundreds of thousands of dollars in margin versus millions of dollars in margin. So with that, there's some great benefits for us in regards to selling into Germany. And the thing is, what's happening today with Tilray, and we get lots of calls for it, is we have consistent supply. So what's happening today, if you're trying to buy cannabis there, you got to go to this person, you got to go to that person. You don't know the supply, you don't know the genetics, you don't know if you're getting it. When you're buying it from Tilray, we have a consistent supply of it, and you're going to get it. The other thing you got to deal with in each country today is getting these permits to sell. So that's something we deal with in permits and that. And we have a big team over there that's focused on growing our business.
Gotcha. Yeah, and to your point, like some licensed producers are buying flower from other LPs. You mentioned UK. The Cookies brand launched its first medical MJ brand in the UK with Medica. Was Tilray involved in that launch?
No, Tilray was not. And I'm on my way to the UK on Monday. And, a big part of, the UK is for us to grow that business with 60 million, people living in the UK, a big medical business there. And a lot of the medical, cannabis there that is bought is probably used for recreational too. So,
Mhm.
from a standpoint there, I think there is a big opportunity for us in the UK, and that's a big focus. And you heard me say before, consumption of beer, the highest. I think
Mm.
Germany is number one, but UK is pretty high up there in regards to beer.
Yeah.
And we love to be selling Montauk and Shock Top and some of our other beers in the UK.
Okay, cool. And so I guess it was just a rumor then. Speaking of rumors, there has been another one circulating, and again, you don't have to spend too much time on this, and maybe it's not even true, but private investment firm Bain Capital, there's been some rumors saying that they're interested in a potential takeover of the company, and it's raised some concerns that they might be looking to take the company private. Is there any truth to this?
Boy, that's the first I've heard of it. So I
Okay.
will tell you this here. I, you know,
Well, are you worried about hostile takeovers at all? With
listen,
the
listen, I there's lots of things I worry about. But if somebody came in and made a right bid for the company, it was right for our shareholders and whatever. Um, the value, the stock price does not reflect what the value is in this company today. So it would have
totally.
to be some good valuations if somebody wanted to do a hostile takeover or takeover of this company.
Gotcha. And then we touched on drinks in the hemp segment. There's been a ton of other peers in the space that have been getting into all kinds of different categories. Are you looking at hemp gummies or anything at the moment, or are you just solely focusing on the drinks
We
for
are
now?
looking at hemp gummies and hemp edibles, absolutely.
Okay, cool. And then you touched on a little bit all these adjacency brands like the Highball, the Runner's High, SweetWater 420. You're just basically tabling that. You're not planning anytime soon to integrate those into the hemp segment at all.
Not right now, but there's
Okay.
a big focus on growing our highball business, our energy drink,
Mhm.
and we got national distribution in Whole Foods. We
Cool.
got, we got Amazon. It's on. I mean, we started
Right.
from scratch and look for it to be a $3-4 million business pretty quickly. Our liquid love business, our water business, there's a big focus on. There's a brand out there, Liquid Death, and there's a lot of water being sold, so we're focused on that. And Athletica has done a great job. Athletic in the non-alc business, and we're out there with Runner's High and our non-alc in our Montauk beer. So we're really focused on the non-alc category. And listen, um, we are looking at the soda category for better for you sodas. We're looking at nutraceuticals and drinks and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
we're looking to be as a Tilray Beverage Company, not just the beer business.
Yeah.
There's some real interesting stuff we're coming out with in regards to our spirits. We're coming out with a tequila. We're coming out with a drink in a pouch, like a Fireball type of drink. So there's lots of new
Okay.
innovation that we're looking at in products and packaging in regards to alcohol levels, etc. So that's a lot of stuff that we're doing.
Oh man, my mind's just racing. I'm thinking of so many questions. Yeah, and Whole Foods being a subsidiary of Amazon, we've seen 68% growth there since you've taken over the brand. You mentioned different distribution methods. What about Total Wine? There's been a lot of that happening lately with peers and DoorDash. Has there been any discussions with those?
There, right now, we sell all our Delta 9 drinks in Total Wine. Great partner, great customer. We sell our spirits in those. Great partner for us. So yeah, absolutely.
With
That's
the
somebody
hemp
we're
the
working.
hemp side?
Yeah, on the hemp side, you can buy our hemp drinks in Total
Okay.
Wine
What
and
about DoorDash?
ABC.
Can you buy?
I think you can buy it on DoorDash. I'm not 100% sure on that one. ABC Liquor, you can, and there's a lot of
Okay.
other retailers that you could buy it.
So that'd
Florida's
be
been Florida's been a strong market for us. Minneapolis has been a strong market. So there's some real good markets out there for us.
okay. And like DoorDash, is that basically up to the distributors? Like, are you basically just selling it to the distributors, and they're making the deal with DoorDash? Like, is Tilray completely out of that?
We're selling to distributors, but we are selling some product on our Happy Flower direct to consumer.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And you touched on soda.
And there's lots of banking laws involved with that, and who will bank and stuff like that. So it's not, some of the easiest stuff to get into, and you got to have a good product. There's some products out there that taste like, as you said before, crap and high sugar levels, etc. So you got to have a real good product.
You mentioned soda. What about Jones Soda? You had the partnership with Mary Jones and Jones Soda, the cannabis division. You had distribution rights in Canada. You're starting with Ontario and British Columbia. Can you tell us how that's going? I was also wondering if you think that that's maybe a potential buyout target for Tilray.
So, Jones Soda and the partnership in Canada does very well. Listen, I've known Jones Soda, and I think they got a great brand, a great business. Not going to comment on that, but yeah, interesting product.
Okay, gotcha. Well, we'll see what happens. And you mentioned, almost $250,000 on the balance sheet of cash. You mentioned strategic investments and accretive M&A. Are you looking at like other producers in Canada, or are you just focusing on the beverage side of things at the moment?
Listen, I think in Canada today, as I said, I got 5 million square feet of grow. I got additional, metric tons where I can grow cannabis. There's nothing I can't do in the cannabis industry today. Flower, pre-rolls, drinks, vapes, infused pre-rolls, edibles, tinctures. So other than just to buy market share, it doesn't make sense to do another acquisition in Canada to go out and buy share. And I think what we got to do there is go out and get share with new products and innovation, etc. From an acquisition standpoint, I think the opportunity for us in additional acquisitions, it's either in the craft beer, the spirits, or wellness foods in Canada for us.
Okay.
And I think right now, doing deals in Canada, listen, I think there's lots of opportunities in Canada. I think where the dollar is today, with tariffs, there's a lot of opportunities. We got a lot of production. So I see lots of, opportunities within the Canadian market.
I agree. And I know we're running short on time, but I didn't do the intro, but Pal Group, Pursuit of Wealth, your home for MJ stocks, crypto assets, news and interviews. Loved the news about crypto and AI. A lot of people hated that. Some think it's rat poison squared, and some people think it's just magic internet money, and it has.
And I'm not trying to be there's
hypey.
It's hypey. All I said is, listen, anybody that doesn't look at AI as being part of their business today, and more from AI, is how do we bring AI into our facilities to help our grow, to help our yields, to help our business, okay? And that's from an AI, is if you're not using AI in your businesses today, you're not using AI in your factories today, then I think you're going to be in trouble. In regards to the crypto piece, listen, I think you come back and sort of say, hey, if you want to be able to do the exchange rates and use crypto to buy our medical cannabis, we'll take it as long as we can exchange it. You want to come to our brew pubs and be able to exchange crypto there, we'll do it. I've had a lot of people want me to be in the crypto business buying crypto. I'm not sure that's what Tilray is. As you said before, if you're buying crypto, then why aren't you buying back your own stock and stuff like that? So
right. No, that's a good point. And in terms of crypto payments, you mentioned, like, what platforms would that be? Would that be solely just like the e-commerce you mentioned potentially in your brew pubs?
Yes.
So it'd be all encompassing essentially.
Yes, and we're set up with the right servers and that to do it, and to be able to get the exchanges and stuff like that. So. Okay,
so you do it yourself. You wouldn't outsource it to a third-party payment
No,
processor.
we'd outsource it to a third party.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of like what crypto you would support and accept, that would probably be left up to the third-party processor, whatever they provide, essentially.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And then you mentioned crypto strategic initiatives. So what is that? Is that like a GameStop, a micro strategy? Are you gonna do? I think it's pretty I don't agree with it at all to be taking loans or issuing stock to buy Bitcoin. Like, what is your plan there? Are you looking to stockpile? Like, are you going to accept crypto as a payment and then just sit on it and hold on it, like hold it as an investment? What are your strategies there? If you can share some information.
So I think, again, as Tilray becomes a progressive company, as I said, with AI, with crypto, and I think, first step is to accept it and hold it as a payment. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm not smart enough to become MicroStrategy in the crypto world. Okay. And I'm not smart enough to do that. And crypto is all over the place. Bitcoin, one day it's 78,000, one day it's 84, 85, 90, whatever. I think right now we're a consumer packaged goods companies focused on our cannabis, our wellness, our beverage business, and you can't ignore the crypto category. You can't ignore crypto like you can't ignore AI. But you're not going to see the Tilray crypto business tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Well, I wouldn't say I wouldn't go as far as saying he's a genius or anything. He was the biggest loser in the .com days as well. So we'll see. It's either he's going to be he's MicroStrategy and Michael Sillery. He's going to be a hero or zero. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it.
I like to sell things. I like to put things on shelves and sell things and get revenue for it. That's what I like to do.
I agree. Yeah, and the revenue just doesn't, like, the company has to make sense with, the amount that you're investing into, these different assets. But I think it's a smart idea personally, just to, I'm more invested in the crypto space than I am in cannabis, and that's just sign of the times, right? One's been in a 5-year bull market and the other one's been in a 5-year bear market. So, but yeah, listen,
But you can't, the thing is, you can't ignore it.
No, exactly.
You can't ignore it. I think that's where we're putting our toes in the water and where we see opportunities, and we're looking at that. No different, as I said, AI. Where are we using AI in our business? I have something called Copilot on my phone, which is part of Microsoft. Listen, yeah. I go to Copilot every day to get my information and with AI out there. So again, in our facilities where we're using AI to grow flower, our genetics, our yields, our business, in a lot of AI is used in our marketing plans today. So it's more AI, and the crypto. Listen, I got 4 kids and they buy crypto, they're using crypto. How do you connect with the crypto and our beverages? And ultimately, listen, you're in the crypto. A lot of our shareholders are crypto traders too. So how do we connect it to what makes sense?
I think that's a great approach, and like I'll be honest, I'm heavily invested in crypto, but my passion is cannabis. Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy and you got to go. So is there anything you want to leave the audience with, Irwin?
No, I really appreciate, and I appreciate your support. And I think the biggest thing that happens is trying to understand what's underneath the hood here at Tilray. And I am out there working for our consumers, with our employees, our shareholders, and yes, part of anything I get criticized for it. And I will tell you, I'm proud of what we built in 5 years. And if we didn't diversify and we were just another cannabis business, man, we'd be in a lot worse shape from a stock price and where we are today. And I think that's what the important thing is where we are today. And when you said to me, you miss numbers, but you got to look at the total picture here. You got to look at the balance sheet. You got to look what's in there. You got to look at all the assets that are in here today and what makes up Tilray. We sell in 22 states. We have operations around the world. We have people around the world. We have billions of dollars of real estate around the world. The balance sheet is key, and we've only been around for 5 years. So I appreciate our shareholders, but I think understanding, what's here at Tilray is important. And there's no other company like Tilray. There's cannabis companies out there. There's beverage companies out there. But you think of what we have within Tilray today, I think is something pretty amazing.
I agree. Well, listen, I had a lot of fun today. I really appreciate your time, Irwin, and I hope to do it again soon. Have you back on the show at some
Uh,
point
I
in the near
I
future.
enjoyed it too, and I enjoy when I'm on with smart questions, and every one of them were great questions today.
Thank you.
And I love coming on to be able to tell our story. And I always say I love to go to the tallest building in the world to tell our story, but I don't have to go to the tallest building. I can just get on with you, and I know the message will get out there. Okay. And for those out there, happy Easter, happy Passover, and everybody have a great weekend. And I look forward to being back on with you.
Thank you very much. Happy Easter, Irwin, and everybody else tuning in. Really appreciate it. Have a great long weekend. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you very much.